Welcome to another episode of Core Vision Financial Topics. Today, I am your guest host, Andrea Lee, and I am actually going to have our typical host, Brett Rice, is going to be our guest speaker today. You want to introduce yourself, Brett?
Brett Rice, Core Vision Financial Group, financial advisor. Been with Core Vision for over 3 years. Just sitting here trying to help people get educated on options for retirement plans and retirement savings. Just trying to make sure that we do our part in, getting as much information out as we can.
All right. So since we did this last, I'm not sure that we have talked about your new designation, and I'd like for you to kind of talk about what that is, what it means, what it gives you the ability to do.
So the designation that I received during COVID was what's called a CPFA. It's a Certified Plan Fiduciary Advisor. So what that's intended to do is be an advisor to plan fiduciaries. And traditional retirement plans through employers like 401ks, 403bs, there are going to be certain individuals who are considered fiduciaries along the way. The plan administrators, the people that, hand out the packets, do the investment selection, all of those things. And the idea is behind that is that I give them guidance and advise them on, hey, here's the benchmarks for expenses. This is, the ability to have all the different funds, which are the best funds out there, which funds, all of those type of things, to give them advice so that they're doing their fiduciary duty in, exploring cost in neighboring plans. Are they offering enough funds? Are they offering, a balance of funds that everyone else is offering? Are they doing what's in the best interest of all the plan participants? And they would, come to me as an advisor for that, and I would help them, do the research and benchmark against other companies and things like that.
Okay. You hear the word fiduciary a lot. Can you maybe just touch on what that means in case somebody's not familiar?
Yeah, so the idea behind a fiduciary is that you're doing what's in the best interest of the client, whether that is the client is the employer providing the plan participants. You become a fiduciary to different people, but it's always that you're acting in their best interest, right? You're not, saying, hey, this is what's best for me. It's, hey, this is what's best for everyone involved in this plan, or this is what is best to, help protect the plan administrators from, making sure that they're doing the right thing for their participants.
Right. You always are putting their interests ahead of your own. So, Brett, we're going to talk about maybe some small business retirement planning options, I think, today. What would be the benefit? Why would an employer want to add that to his business or his or her business?
So in today's labor market, one of the things that people are comparing when they start looking for jobs or staying at jobs, or, what are the benefits that I have working here at this company? And one of the things that a lot of people are looking for is, what is the company providing me as far as retirement savings? What is their contribution? What is their match? What are my options inside of that plan? So I think that smaller employers being able to offer retirement savings plans for people is a huge benefit, a huge marketing piece, a huge employee retention piece that just allows them to say, hey, look, I'm offering, a very similar package as to the next company. So there's no reason for you to switch jobs based upon the benefits.
Okay, and you touched on a couple things. One was 401ks, 403bs. You talked about expenses. So today we're going to talk about maybe some of the options for smaller business owners. Everybody, I think, is probably familiar with a 401k. You hear that a lot. But if you're a smaller business or just a sole proprietor, a 401k may not make sense for you right now or may not make sense for you ever. So what other options do, those smaller business owners have in order to save for retirement for themselves and for their employees?
Yeah, so when you're talking about self-employed people, really, they have a lot of options. But when we talk about, maybe an introduction to that, we're going to talk about IRAs and all of the different IRAs. There are traditional IRAs, there are Roth IRAs, there are SEPs, Simples. There are a range of different types of IRAs for someone to get their retirement savings started. We're going to say that a traditional or a Roth IRA is, going to be, I'm going to say, the least complicated one to get started. But then there are also rules around it that make it not applicable to everyone, right? There are income level restrictions. There are contribution restrictions. In a traditional and a Roth, you're going to be up against traditionally the $6,000 annually. There is a catch-up provision that allows you to put more in if you're over 50, but traditionally for most people, it's going to be under $6,000 for that annual contribution into a traditional or a Roth IRA. When you get into SEPs and Simples, they do have higher ceilings for contributions, and that's why those become options. As say the company grows, revenue goes up, there do become additional options with that. Now, self-employed people also do have options for 401ks, and that's just traditionally not a place you start just because they cost more to get started. They would be in the thousands of dollars annually to operate, run, do all those things that are necessary.
Okay, so we mentioned IRAs. A lot of times I feel like sometimes people may not understand what IRA even means. So IRA is an individual retirement account. So that is for you and you alone. You can be the only account holder on it. And it's retirement designed for you. Now, you have to have earned income in order to do those contributions. You do have the option for a spousal IRA. So if you have a spouse that works, but you work, by being a homemaker or staying home with your children, then you would be able to do a spousal IRA.
Yeah, Andrea, that's a great point on an IRA. It is an individual retirement account. And, a lot of times when we're educating people on, hey, they used to work somewhere, they have a retirement plan there, they no longer work there. And, for one of the many reasons, they do not want to move it to their new plan. Maybe they don't have a new plan. Maybe they're starting their own business and they want to take those funds with them and roll them over. So we'd roll them over into a rollover IRA. They're like, well, I want to put my spouse's name on that. Well, it doesn't work that way as an individual retirement account. They could be listed as beneficiaries and there's other things that can be done, but their name cannot be on the account. Specifically addressing it as their partial ownership.
Right. Okay. So what's the difference between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA?
The real difference between the traditional and the Roth IRA is going to be the tax treatment on those. A traditional IRA is usually pre-tax, so the money has not been taxed yet. And so once you start taking distributions from that account, those would then get applied to your federal income tax rates, your state income tax rates, your local income tax rates. Whereas a Roth, you go ahead and pay the tax at your taxable income rate now, and then you allow that to grow and continue to invest in it. And then when you take the distributions in retirement, they come out tax-free. So you've already paid the tax on a Roth, and then it comes out tax-free. In a traditional, you've not paid the tax, and then the tax gets paid traditionally at a lower income tax rate in retirement, because you would be, typically you're going to make less money in retirement than you did while you were working.
Great. So those limits you said were 6,000 or 7,000 if you qualify for the catch-up. But what would be your next option if you maybe want to be able to put away a little more than 6,000 a year?
So, like moving up the ladder of complexity, we'll move up to the simple IRA next, which based upon its name. It's still pretty simple to set up a simple IRA, but it does have higher income levels, or higher contribution levels, I'm sorry. So on a contribution level on a simple is up to 13.5, and then with the catch up, 16.5.
Okay, so if I'm a small business owner and I'm considering this, what are there any like criteria, or is there anything that says, yeah, this is where you should start?
So simple IRAs are intended for companies, smaller companies of under 100 people. This allows, because while it's pretty simple in setup, it's simple in paperwork, 100 people or fewer gives you a pretty good range of employees to participate in the plan.
Great, Brett. So what type of company might be interested in starting a simple IRA? Okay. So with a traditional IRA, I have to have at least $6,000 or $7,000 of earned income, but nobody else gets to contribute to that. So with a simple, do I get any, as from an employee standpoint, do I get a match as an employer, or do I have that added expense?
That's a great question, because yes, that's where you start getting involved with, hey, this is how the company can help, as an added benefit, say, hey, we're going to contribute to your retirement savings through a simple. Like traditionally, the companies aren't normally going to contribute to your traditional IRA or your Roth IRA. It's an individual account. The expectation is that you're going to contribute your own money to that. But when you start getting into the more complicated ones, the simples, the SEPs and such, it does allow for the company to match funds. So when you start getting into that, you can have a salary deferral from the employee, and then you could have a match from the employer.
Okay. So the benefit to the employer is those contributions that they make, they get a tax deduct, right? And they also are going to increase employee retention, right? Because that's an added benefit as an employee.
Yep.
What is the benefit if you're an employee?
Well, one of the benefits as an employee is you're getting the free money from the employer, right? Is, hey, they're saying, no, one of the benefits of working here is we're going to provide you with a retirement match program. And then as an employee, you're saying, hey, I need to take advantage of this money my company is willing to give me for continuing to be an employee here.
And then another benefit is, I'm guessing, the limit's higher. So you're able to increase, right?
Correct. Yeah, the salary deferral, the contribution limits on a SEP are much higher than on the traditional and Roth IRA. You can do $13,500. Under 50 and 50 and over, you can do $16,500. So another rule that we haven't discussed is, in order to be able to participate in the simple, is you have to have earned at least $5,000 from the employer. So you could be part-time and participate, but you have to have earned income of at least $5,000 to participate.
Okay. And there, with a 401k, I know that you can put some stipulations as the employer, like an employee has to be there at least a year or so on. Can you do that with a simple IRA as well?
So with the simple IRA, yeah, you can determine when people are eligible to get into that plan. Also, yeah, I mean, you could set limits, like they've had to have earned $5,000 for at least 2 years, and they expect to earn $5,000 in the next year. And as offering that as a benefit, you can say, hey, you need to have worked here at least 1 year before we start providing you the match.
And is there a vesting schedule on simple IRAs? How does that work?
In a simple IRA, once you are eligible to start participating in the plan, and you are participating in the plan, you're 100% vested in that money. That's, part of the simplicity behind a simple is there's not additional rules that say there's a vesting schedule, there's all these other periods and stipulations and, tags on there that, say, hey, this is how this gets to be distributed.
Okay, so next, let's talk about SEP IRAs. kind of the next step up, or where does that kind of fall in the spectrum?
So a SEP is traditionally for small business owners, sole proprietors, individuals. It does have a higher contribution limit. So if somebody wanted to contribute more than the 13.5 or the 16.5 for a simple, a SEP allows you up to $58,000 or 25% of your annual salary. So it does allow for a higher ceiling, and all employees who participate in the SEP get the same contributions from the company, right? So if it's 2%, it's 2% across the board, or it's, whatever that match is by the employer, everybody gets the same percentage match.
Okay. And so if I'm an employee on a SEP, do I opt in? Do I contribute in order to get the match?
So as an employee in a SEP, it is not mandatory for you to contribute in order to get the employer's match. So you could say, hey, I'm not going to contribute at all, and the company is required to still give you the 2% or whatever that contribution is they're giving to all other employees in the plan. Okay.
So if the employer or if the employee chooses not to contribute, the employer still has to contribute on their behalf?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, whether you participate or not, the employer is going to make contributions in your name.
Okay.
So with a SEP, you're 100% vested at the time of the contribution. So there's no vesting schedule or technically a waiting period for you to get the funds that the employer is contributing on your behalf.
Okay, so hold up. I can be an employee. I don't have to contribute anything. My employer is going to contribute for me, and it's 100% my money from day one.
Correct.
Okay, so that looks pretty good for the employee.
Yeah, that looks pretty good for the employee.
What about for the employer?
So to without getting too deep, right? Because this is all to get around all the testing and all the regulatory requirements that when you put on the stipulations of like vesting schedules and some of these other things, you get into the ERISA requirements of saying you've got to do all this top heavy testing. You got to do all this testing to make sure that there's no discrimination and everybody's being treated the same. So you get around that by saying this is how the plan is set up. Everybody gets the same whether they participate or not. So it's now a benefit to the whole population. And so that's how you get around. I don't want to say get around. This is written that way so you don't have to do that. It brings down the expense of managing and administrating the plan because now you don't have to do the back testing. There's certain things that you don't have to do now from an administrative standpoint that allow you to open a retirement savings account for your employees at a lower cost to the company.
So SEPs, in a lot of ways, it almost sounds like might make a lot of sense for a sole proprietor. Is that true? Is that just maybe the way I'm seeing it?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the ones when you start looking at sole proprietors. This is one that is recommended a lot of times because of the things that we just talked about, right? There are higher contribution limits, there are lower testing requirements, expenses lower. It just kind of makes sense for a smaller group.
Okay, so small meaning like single or just a few people?
Yeah, smaller that could be like an owner and a handful of employees.
All right, so I know we talked about 401ks and them being a little more expensive. So as a small business owner or as even a sole proprietor, would a 401k ever make sense for me? And if so, why?
So 401ks are more expensive than the options that we've talked about previously because of the fact of the testing and the options and opportunities that are available inside of a 401k. So inside of there, you can say, hey, different groups inside of a 401k get different packages. You can say that there are different vesting schedules for each of those groups. There are different requirements for people to participate in those groups. So it does allow for some very specific rules to be included in those groups. But then on the backside, though, it does also say, hey, you've got to do this testing. You got to prove, you've got to fill out, 5,500. You got to do all this paperwork to make sure that inside of those groups you are following those individual rules. And it is significantly more expensive to operate a 401k than it is a traditional or Roth IRA, a simple IRA. And that's why, like we said, we are going to step up this and say, as a 401k, it's more expensive, but if you're going to be able to spread that cost over a population that, say, maybe is, over 100 people, as a small business, you're operating with, say, 115, 120, 130 people, it might make sense that, hey, the expense divided over that size group may make sense in order for you to be able to, have different options inside of that plan, different requirements, different vesting schedules, all of those things. It could make sense.
Okay, so what's a situation, maybe just give me an example of a 401k making sense for a for a sole proprietor?
Say you have a small company that is all, I'll say, highly compensated individuals, and they all want to contribute, say, the max to a plan. What you may do is go look and say, okay, well, where can we get the most, money for that, while including, more people in there, and say, how do we spread this cost out over a lot of people, but yet get enough investment options that people will want to participate in it and have a higher match, higher contribution level than they would in the traditional Roth IRAs or even the simple IRA. So yeah, another option is the solo 401k, where as an individual with a additional revenue stream, you can contribute on top of the 19.5 you would be contributing to a regular 401k at your main place of business. If you had a second revenue stream, you could contribute up to 25% of that income towards that retirement plan, up to the $58,000 a year combined between the multiple plans. So if you had a full-time job at one place and you had a side hustle or a second income, you could contribute that into a second plan, have two plans with a max contribution limit annually of $58,000.
All right, so one last thing to talk about is a defined benefit plan. What is that? Who does it make sense for? And what are maybe some of the details about it?
So a defined benefit plan ideally is somebody who's been somewhere for a long time. They've got a successful company and they want to contribute say $60,000 a year above the limits for, say, 401ks, solo 401ks, multiple 401ks, those items. So contribution limits on a defined benefit plan can be in excess of $100,000 annually, depending upon your age, compensation history. There can be some very complex rules about a defined benefit plan that make them expensive and difficult to set up and manage and keep on going. I mean, there are annual contribution minimums that if you can't make as the employer contributing, that there are penalties and taxes involved that require you to say, hey, once I start this plan and start contributing, I am going to do that for the length of time that the plan is open. You have to do it every year or you're penalized.
So in a defined benefit plan, that seems fairly robust. If I have any questions about any of these plans and how do I know which one's best for me? What do I do if I'm thinking about maybe starting one of these for myself or my business? Where do I kind of go from here?
Yeah, ideally the way you would approach that is you're gonna get a financial professional and you're gonna get your team, your tax accountant, your lawyer, everybody's going to get together and we're going to talk through it, and we're going to do the math and say, hey, depending on which one of these plans, this is tax benefits, tax consequences, contribution limits, all these requirements, cost, plan participant opportunities, what are the options for the people in the plan, vesting schedules, all of these things we just talked about. Sit down and chart them all out and say, depending upon which plan you were to choose to go with, these are how this has impacts on the company's taxes, on the owner's taxes, on everything involved in that whole scenario there. To be able to get a full evaluation on it, to say, hey, look, given where your company is currently, we feel this is the best plan. It's just fits where the growth of the company is currently. But sitting down with a financial professional to start that process, to say, hey, what are my options as a small business owner? It's probably the best place to start, and then bring your tax person in, lawyers in, and your legal team, all of those people to get started.
All right. Well, thanks, Brett. I think that's been very helpful and probably leaves us all with a lot more questions. But I think we know, if we've got questions, where to go to get those answered. So thank you for watching. Hopefully this was helpful, and we will see you next time.
So Andrew, yeah, great point. I want to thank everybody for watching the video. And please, if you have questions, reach out to us. We'll gladly sit down with you, help you evaluate your situation, and say which of these plans potentially could be best interest. If it's, hey, I just want to get something started, or hey, we need to take a look at adding this as a benefit to our employee package to try and help retention, or to just add a benefit to employees that have been with you and helped you grow. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Our contact information will be here at the end of the video, and then get with us and we'll help you figure it out. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.